Susan Storm, Earth-616. Dr. Susan, Sue, Richards, née Storm, a.k.a. the Invisible Woman, is an American superpowered adventurer. She was a college student before she was exposed to high levels of cosmic radiation when boyfriend and scientist, Dr. Reed Richards, took her with her younger brother, Johnny Storm, and pilot Ben Grimm, into space in the stolen rocket Marvel 1. The radiation mutated her and her friends, turning her invisible and allowing her to create force fields. Together they became the Fantastic Four, a team of adventurers who explored space, time, and alternate dimensions and saved the world along the way from science-based threats. Early years. Susan Storm and her younger brother, Johnny, lived uneventfully on Long Island until their mother, Mary Storm, died in an automobile accident. Their father, Franklin Storm, a doctor, failed to save her. Despondent, he began to drink and gambled away the family fortune, eventually winding up in a penitentiary for murder after accidentally killing his loan shark. The children went to live with their Aunt Mary Gay Jewel Dinkins, who ran a boarding house. When Susan was in her late teens, she fell in love with one of her aunt's boarders, Reed Richards, who was working on his third doctorate at Empire State University. Sue later followed Richards to California, where she half-heartedly tried to break into show business. Reed was working on an experimental faster-than-light rocket ship called the Marvel, one that he intended to use to explore an Earth-like planet named Spire located 44 light-years away. When the project lost its government funding, he decided to launch the prototype, certain that the flight would succeed and attract more funding, and Sue went along for her own reasons. Ben Grimm, a test pilot, took the controls. Johnny filled out the crew. When the rocket ship passed through a storm of cosmic rays, it was hit with an unexpected intensity that caused the ship to crash back to Earth. The experience gave each of them superhuman abilities, and perhaps more importantly, it forged almost unbreakable bonds between them. They became the Fantastic Four, and Storm took the name Invisible Girl. Fantastic Four. In the early years of the Fantastic Four, Sue spent much of her time keeping the team together. Reed spent long hours in his laboratory, Grimm moped over his appearance, Johnny acted out like any teenager. Her power of invisibility had little use in battling supervillains such as Doctor Doom and Galactus, but her empathy and common sense prevented several breakups and defections. Her discontent manifested itself in an attraction to Namor, who returned her affections, but the relationship effectively ended after Namor abducted Sue in an attempt to persuade her to be his queen. She soon discovered new powers. She could turn other objects, besides herself, invisible and project and manipulate powerful force fields. Although unable to perform offensively on a par with the Thing, she could defend against almost any threat. When the Super Skrull, possessing the combined powers of the Fantastic Four, attacked the team, the Human Torch managed to trap him inside a cave, but the Super Skrull escaped and impersonated Sue's father, Franklin Storm. The Four exposed the Super Skrull, but the Skrull strapped a bomb to the real Franklin's chest, and Franklin sacrificed his own life to save his children. A trip to the Skrull homeworld and the death of Warlord Morat, the Skrull who authorized Franklin's murder, brought some measure of revenge. Motherhood. Sue eventually married Reed in a wedding ceremony attended by most of the world's heroes. A difficult pregnancy followed, during which Crystal of the Inhumans took her place on the team. At the last moment, to save the unborn child, the Fantastic Four had to visit the negative zone and borrow the cosmic control rod of Annihilus. Her son Franklin, named after her father, manifested strong and unusual powers almost immediately. When Annihilus kidnapped Franklin and triggered those powers, he turned Franklin into a living bomb and caused his powers to increase exponentially and uncontrollably, until Franklin threatened to wipe out all life in the solar system with a psychic blast. Reed was left with no choice but to inhibit Franklin's higher brain functions in order to defuse him. It was the last straw for Sue, who left Mr. Fantastic and took Franklin with her. During Sue Storm's second hiatus, the Inhuman Medusa took her place. The old bonds, though, drew Susan back to the team and led her to rekindle her relationship with Reed. Franklin was restored to normal soon after, and the Richards family was back together once more. During an extended trip to the negative zone, a sort of second honeymoon, she conceived another child. Seeking some peace for this pregnancy, Sue convinced Mr. Fantastic to move to the Connecticut suburbs, where they posed as the Benjamins. This unborn daughter began to give off radiation. Despite the efforts of Mr. Fantastic and several other experts, the girl was apparently stillborn. When the symbiote escaped from Baxter Building with the help of Christophe Renard, the symbiote tries to possess Franklin, fighting the Fantastic Four while possessing Reed's body and possessing Sue in order to get to Franklin, but Franklin was able to reject the symbiote thanks to his father and Spider-Man's help. Malice. Psycho Man took advantage of Sue's fragile self-control at this point and amplified her negative emotions. She became Malice, with all of the Invisible Girl's powers but none of her restraint, and attacked the Fantastic Four. Mr. Fantastic helped her throw off Psycho Man's influence, but she lost control again when the Fantastic Four confronted Psycho Man. She turned his own control box on him, which shorted out his nervous system and nearly killed him. The episode would have lasting effects. The Invisible Girl changed her name to Invisible Woman, she discovered how to use force objects, see powers below, and in the long term, she lost a measure of self-confidence, knowing that malice still lurked inside her. Sue left the Fantastic Four again, this time with Mr. Fantastic, to spend time with Franklin, who had regained his faculties and needed full-time mentoring. They worked part-time with the Avengers for a while. They also helped the Silver Surfer resuscitate Galactus, during which Sue came in contact with the Infinity Gems. Distrustful of such power, she fell prey to malice again. The Soul Gem tried and failed to combine Reed's and Sue's souls, which brought forth the In-Betweener and sent malice back to Sue's subconscious. The Fantastic Four, as always, pulled them back. During the Infinity War, Sue had to confront her doppelganger and incorporate its evil into herself. That boost allowed Malice to regain control temporarily. Later, claiming that Franklin's presence in this timeline would lead to destruction, Reed Richards' father Nathaniel abducted the child into the future. Nathaniel raised Franklin for years in the future, training him to be a warrior and to master his superhuman powers. The adolescent Franklin journeyed back in time, arriving in the Fantastic Four's headquarters mere moments after Nathaniel had abducted him as a child. The teenage Franklin called himself Psi-Lord, and wielded vast psionic powers, although they remained far short of his full potential. Sue struggled against Malice's influence, inevitably losing ground. When Malice manifested again, Psi-Lord drew Malice's essence into himself. Finally, however, Psi-Lord somehow was removed from the Fantastic Four's time and was replaced by the child Franklin, as he had been at the time that Nathaniel had abducted him. Leader. That was only the beginning of a tumultuous period. Reed disappeared for some time, apparently killed by Victor Von Doom. Sue Storm became leader of the Fantastic Four, recruited Ant-Man to take over Reed's role, and quickly grew into her new responsibilities. Effectively a widow, Sue had to fend off many potential suitors, especially Namor. She never gave up looking for Richards, though, and after a long search, she found him stranded in the past. Their reunion was bittersweet. Reed felt threatened at first by Sue's newfound competence and confidence, particularly since months trapped in isolation had left him severely traumatized, paranoid, and indecisive, although he soon realized he was foolish for thinking so. After Reed's return, Namor realized he still had feelings for Sue and assaulted her in an attempt to claim her for himself. Reed successfully fended him off. The whole team appeared to die next, in the final battle with Onslaught, who had kidnapped Franklin. Instead they, and the Avengers, found themselves on Counter-Earth, in a pocket universe Franklin had created to save them. In a sense, they had been reborn and had to start their lives over. Once the heroes on Counter-Earth realized what had happened, they returned to their original homes. Continuing adventures. An even more surprising resurrection unfolded during the team's reality-warping conflict with the cosmic being Abraxas when Franklin revealed he had used his powers to rescue Sue's seemingly stillborn second child years earlier, and that this child had been raised in an alternate future to become the Marvel Girl, Valeria Von Doom, who was now an ally of the present-day Fantastic Four. As a side effect of Abraxas's defeat, Marvel Girl was restored to her original state, as an unborn child in Sue's womb. This time, Sue's pregnancy resulted in the birth of a healthy baby girl, christened Valeria in memory of Dr. Doom's first love. Doom had insisted on naming the child in exchange for assisting with the difficult birth. To help Johnny develop responsibility, Sue forced him to become the business manager for Fantastic Four Incorporated, a job he gradually grew into. Doom's favors, as always, had strings attached. His main focus had shifted from science to sorcery, and he used his special bond with Valeria as a focus to cast spells against the Fantastic Four. He soon defeated them, captured all four, tossed Franklin into hell, abducted Valeria, and tortured Ben, Johnny, and Sue while Reed listened helplessly. Doom's own hubris led to his downfall. His infernal patrons dragged him to the underworld of Hazareth. Prior to being dragged to hell, however, Doom vindicatively and seemingly permanently scarred Reed's face. The Fantastic Four were left reeling, both mentally and physically, after Doom's vicious attack. Sue struggled to help heal her son, who was so traumatized by his time being tortured in hell that he shut down emotionally and lost the ability to speak. With Doom gone, Richards claimed Latveria in the name of the Fantastic Four and began dismantling Doom's arsenal. The international community saw it as a test of sovereignty and protested. It resulted that Reed's invasion of Latveria was part of a plan to defeat Doom permanently and thus ensure his family's safety. Doom returned to find himself in an inescapable trap of Reed's making, which Reed had constructed in order to ensure Doom could no longer harm his family. Unaware of his plans, the rest of the Fantastic Four burst in to rescue Reed, and, in an attempt to escape, Doom possessed Sue, then Ben. While in a possessed Ben's body, Doom grabbed Johnny and vindicatively threatened to break him in two if Reed did not murder his best friend. Ben temporarily broke free of Doom's control long enough to beg Reed to kill him, since he had no desire to be even indirectly responsible for Johnny's death, and Reed, left with no other choice, complied. While Johnny wept and Sue comforted him, Reed spent the next hour frantically trying to resuscitate his best friend but did not succeed. Sue did her best to comfort her husband, but he was too lost in his grief and guilt to forgive himself for what Doom had forced him to do. She attempted to mend fences between Reed and Johnny, who was struggling to forgive Reed for Ben's death, despite the fact that Johnny's failure to follow Reed's orders had led directly to Doom's possession of Ben and Ben's subsequent death. Reed convinced Sue and Johnny to follow him to heaven, where they succeeded in returning Grimm to life. To avoid charges of treason for his invasion of Latveria, Reed gave up most of his patents and thus most of his income. He later took a job working for a top-secret military project in an attempt to restore their lost fortune. Later, an unscrupulous business manager swindled the Fantastic Four out of their fortunes, and, penniless once more, they took regular jobs and lived in regular homes. Sue became a teacher. She was forced to fend off Namor when he arrived and attempted to carry her off to Atlantis once again, although Reed soon arrived to help defend her. She also trained in martial arts under Iron Fist. Reed eventually revealed that he had allowed the loss of their fortune to occur because he wanted to give them back the normal lives he believed they lost because of his failure to protect them. With few regrets, they returned to their former lives. A game of musical powers ensued. A band of aliens, survivors of Galactus, came to Earth to neutralize Susan. They had developed a planetary cloaking device, and only Susan could help Galactus bypass their device. Reed Richards used another device that, as far as the aliens could tell, removed her powers. Instead, it traded Sue's and Johnny's powers. The immediate threat over, Reed reversed the trade. As a reward for derailing the Cloak Project, Galactus made Johnny his new herald for a short time. An after effect of Johnny's power cosmic removed everyone's powers temporarily. Civil War. The Civil War split the team once again. Mr. Fantastic supported the Superhuman Registration Act, while Sue and Johnny joined the Resistance, horrified over how the Thor clone killed to Goliath. Nick Fury provided both of them fake IDs as a husband and wife, much to their chagrin. During the final battle, however, Mr. Fantastic shielded Sue from a bullet fired by the Taskmaster and was severely wounded. She retaliated by using a force field to pound Taskmaster into the ground. Sue helped clean up New York in the aftermath of the war and, along with the other secret Avengers, was granted amnesty. She reconciled with Reed and together they took a short hiatus from the team to work on their marriage. Attributes. Powers. The Invisible Woman received her powers when cosmic rays bombarded her body. Mr. Fantastic theorizes that Sue Storm's powers are vibrational energy from the higher dimension of hyperspace, home of Celestial. As yet, the only limit seems to be her own reserve. She is reluctant to stretch her powers until absolutely necessary. Hyperstorm stated that Sue barely scratches the surface of her true potential powers. She is capable of creation and destruction. Invisibility. The Invisible Woman has the mental ability to manipulate ambient cosmic energy for a variety of effects, including the rendering of herself and other objects invisible, and the construction of solid, invisible force fields. In an as yet unknown manner, cosmic energy interacts with the cells of her entire body in such a way as to produce a new form of energy with unusual properties. By a simple act of concentration, she can cause all wavelengths of visible, infrared, and ultraviolet light to bend around her without distortion. She also somehow directs enough undistorted light to her eyes to retain her full range of vision while invisible. An observer, unaware of the peculiar path light takes around her body, would have the sensation of seeing through her. The Invisible Woman can also mentally project the invisible energy produced within the cells of her body in order to render other people or objects invisible. The largest volume she can as yet turn invisible at a single time is approximately 40,000 cubic feet of volume, 1,133 cubic meters, equivalent to a small swimming pool. While trapped inside Human Torch's body, Sue was able to make an invisible hole equivalent to the size of the moon on his body, noting she was shrinking in size. Sue is also shown to be able to turn a whole planet invisible by combining with her force field for an extended period of time. She has sufficient control over her power that she can turn parts of her body selectively invisible. She is also able to make objects that have been turned invisible by other sources visible by letting her own energy projection interfere with that other method of invisibility. Further, she can make energy that is not in the visual portion of the electromagnetic spectrum visible by a similar interaction. Sue can detect people or objects made invisible by means other than her own powers, and can restore those targets to a visible state at will. Sue is naturally and effortlessly invisible to radar equivalents. Blindness inducement. By turning optic nerves invisible, Sue can make others temporarily blind. Color manipulation. Sue can also apply her ability to manipulate the interactions of light waves to seemingly change the color of objects, for example altering her hair color or turning the thing pink. Psionic hyperspace force fields. While the cells of the invisible woman's body produce a certain energy manifestation, the cells of her brain produce a different, more potent manifestation. Through concentration, she is able to project an invisible field of psionic force drawn from hyperspace, which she can manipulate into a number of relatively simple forms: rectangular planes, cylinders, globes, domes, cones, etc. The complexity of the shape is limited by her ability to imagine, mentally visualize, a particular form and keep it in sharp mental focus. Not even she is able to see the forms she creates. The size of a given psionic force projection is also limited by her ability to imagine. The smallest force projection she can visualize, and maintain the visualization, is the size of a marble. The largest solid force projection she can visualize and maintain is about 100 feet in diameter. She can project larger force objects if they are hollow. For instance, she could visualize and project a dome 1 foot thick about a mile in diameter, 5,280 feet, and a dome 1 inch in thickness she can project for about 3.2 miles. Small objects at high speeds become missiles, large objects at slow speeds become rams. She can make these objects grow or shrink as desired. At times, Sue is able to project a force field strong enough to cover the whole planet for an extended period of time. She can also create more complex constructs out of her force fields, such as stairs, weapons, and other complex objects. The Invisible Woman is able to use the projection of her psionic force to travel through the air. By projecting a rising column beneath her feet and simultaneously causing it to expand and topple at the same time, then creating another column that catches her, shrinks, rights itself and then repeating the process, she is able to effect a zigzag flight path. She is able to reach an average speed of about 25 miles per hour, until she becomes fatigued by the concentration, after about 4 hours. Sue's force fields have also prevented telekinesis from passing through them. This was shown when she used a force field around herself to keep Jean Grey's telekinesis from affecting her. The force field made it impossible for Jean to attack her with telekinesis. When Sue put a force field around Jean, her telekinetic attack upon various other persons in the immediate vicinity ceased. Sue also demonstrated a similar ability when facing Psylord, a grown version of her son Franklin. He was unable to read her mind while her force field was up. When Sue projects her force field around the Red Ghost when he is in intangible state, he automatically becomes solid. Since her power is an extension of her mind and body, the Invisible Woman is affected by inertial forces acting upon her projections. Thus if a car traveling at 60 miles per hour hit a wall of her force that was 6 inches thick, unless she generated a bracing shape against a sufficiently sturdy object, she would be affected as though she were hit by the car directly. The Invisible Woman is able to control the surface of the field's rigidity to a certain extent. She can cause the surface of the field to be very hard, depending on its thickness, steel-like at about 2.5 feet, or as resilient as foam rubber. By making the field more resilient, she is able to absorb more of the inertia of impacts within the field without having them transmitted to her body. She is also, through training, able to alter the shapes she creates while utilizing those shapes, often to absorb or deflect the force of impacts. When she creates objects of fields that are at the limit of her ability to mentally visualize, they tend to be resilient rather than rigid. As she has grown in the use of her powers. Currently these fields can withstand impacts of class 100 strength, a literally astronomical level. The Fantastic Four, Dr. Doom, and Annihilus once survived passage through a black hole by using these fields, and some help from the cosmic control rod. She is capable of generating and manipulating multiple psionic force fields simultaneously. The fields are capable of briefly enduring blasts from the mad celestials and Galactus. Shock waves. Sue is capable of using her force fields as shock waves, hitting her opponent with the force field capable of hurting Titania. Radar. By emitting low-level waves of invisible force pulsing outward from her body, Sue can detect and locate nearby people or objects in radar-like fashion even if her vision has been compromised. Internal damage. Sue can render people unconscious or induce more serious physical distress by forming force fields within their bodies. Sue states that she can give an instant embolism from 100 yards out, crush windpipes, fill lungs, and drive force spikes through their hearts without blinking. She once threatened Wizard to give him a thrombosis heart attack by blocking his 3 main coronary arteries. Sue has precision control that she can affect small parts of the nervous system, compressing M.O.D.O.K's brainstem with a pound of force field, pressing nerves in Spot's face, forcing air bubbles into the bloodstream, placing force fields in the brains of her targets, causing headaches, or may brain dead. Although she generally avoids using this application of her power in seriously harmful ways. Explosion. By projecting force field within an object and expanding the field, Sue can cause her target to explode. Cosmic ray awareness. Sue's retinas are interpolated shapes based on reflected cosmic rays, which are always present in the atmosphere. This allows her to perceive her own invisible force fields and other invisible objects and, with concentration, can also provide her with a limited form of vision, allowing her to see even if blinded. Abilities. Amateur actress. Sue has some modest experience and ability in the field of acting. Expert sailor. Sue was a champion sailor as a youth, having already won major competitions by the time she was in her early teens. Proficient martial artist. She is a capable unarmed combatant and regularly trains with the other members of the Fantastic Four. She underwent weeks of intensive training by Iron Fist and became skilled in using Bojutsu by manifesting an invisible staff for combat. Weaknesses. Concentration. The size, number, and movements of these objects are limited only by her powers of concentration. Once she stops concentrating on an object, it ceases to exist. Sound constructs. Invisible Woman's force fields are permeable to sound waves, thus Songbird was able to manifest a sound construct inside of the force field to knock her out. Fantastic Four power synergism. The original members of the Fantastic Four are tethered to each other, and act as their own conduits of power. They can be apart within their own universe and retain a connection, but prolonged periods cut off from each other in other universes result in a gradual decline in power levels. If they spend too much time separated this way, they would eventually become powerless. Paraphernalia. Equipment. Fantastic Four uniforms. Sue's clothes are made from unstable molecules so that they turn invisible along with her. Woven into the cloth is an electronic network of transceivers and sensors that tracks her location, condition, and other data. The network relays this information to the rest of the team. A keypad and screen on one glove allows Sue Storm to call up and view the same information from anyone else. Fantastiflare. This small flare gun fires shells that produce a burning 4 symbol. It doubles as an incendiary weapon. Universal translator. Sue has a universal translator that can decipher and interpret languages, both alien and terrestrial, into the native language of the user. Microgalaxy ring. Sue wears a ring given to her by Reed, housing a microgalaxy consisting of 74 inhabited worlds. Transportation. Fantasticar Mk2, Avengers Quinjet, Xantha, or Skrull, Saucer, Fantasticopter, Yukar, Submarine, Fantasticar 1, the Flying Bathtub, Superseded, Marvel 1, Destroyed, and many others. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.